Welcome to One Bite is Everything, the podcast that connects every bite you take to the bigger world, sparking curiosity and inspiring you to ask more questions about the food on your plate. I'm your host, Dana DePrima, and today I'm doing something a little bit different. I thought I would pull some threads out of the last month of news that may have a significant impact on the future of your food. There is so much going on that I warn you in advance about some of the untidy threads here. I will try to point out what I mean as we go forward. I want to cover two things as we look back into January. First, orders and proclamations from the Trump administration, and also a more locally prescribed issue from Point Reyes, California. First, let's focus on the chaos surrounding international trade, the water supply, and federal funding. Farmers are facing the impact of tariffs on goods that we export, unprecedented water releases with a big impact coming this summer, and a sudden freeze on federal funding. How do these changes affect farmers? How will they ripple through the food supply chain? And what does all of this mean for the food on your table? Stick with me as we break it all down, fact by fact. Let's start with trade. President Trump escalated tensions with our top trading partners, Mexico, Canada, and China, by imposing 25% tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada, along with 10% tariffs on Canadian energy and Chinese imports. As soon as the news hit, the stock market plunged. Economists warned of price hikes, job losses, and damage to vital trade relationships. Canada responded swiftly, with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announcing $100 billion in retaliatory 25% tariffs on key U.S. exports like agricultural products, beer, bourbon, and fruit juice. Here's why this matters. Canada is the largest foreign buyer of U.S. agricultural goods, and now American farmers face steep challenges selling their products across the border. The Liquor Control Board of Ontario, Canada, the world's largest buyer of wine, has stopped purchasing American alcohol, which directly impacts producers in California, Kentucky, and Oregon. Without access to these export markets, U.S. farmers could lose billions. Crops may rot in the fields, and farms that depend on export revenue will be especially vulnerable. In a kerfuffle with Colombia over deportation protocols, President Trump threatened a 25% tariff on Colombian products. Think coffee, cut flowers, and petrol. And Colombia retaliated, putting corn exports in the crosshairs. Colombia imports 96.7% of the corn that it feeds its own livestock from the United States, putting Colombia in the top 5 export markets for U.S. corn. In 2003, the U.S. exported more than 4 million metric tons of corn to Colombia, which translated to $1.14 billion in sales. According to a bipartisan group of lawmakers eager to protect the trade between the U.S. and Colombia, led by Senator Todd Young, who is a Republican from Indiana, American farmers cannot afford to lose such a vital export market, especially when access to the top U.S. corn export market, Mexico, is already at risk. Now, let's move to water and the fires in California. In the political back and forth, water politics became a tug of war. President Trump claimed on social media that the U.S. military had turned on the water in California, meaning basically that local water managers released large amounts of water from 2 major reservoirs that are traditionally reserved to irrigate Central California farmland during the summer. The move is being defined as a political stunt, as none of the water released is actually going to the areas affected by the fires. Water managers describe the release as extremely unprecedented. The reservoirs typically store water for crops like almonds, lettuce, and tomatoes. Now that water is gone. One water manager reported, "This is going to hurt farmers. This takes water out of the summer irrigation portfolio." Without adequate irrigation, thousands of acres could go unplanted. disrupting the fresh produce supply chain nationwide. Remember, California produces over 40% of the nation's fruits, vegetables, and nuts, so what happens there affects food prices across the country. Next, the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, froze all federal grants and loans. For farmers, this freeze could halt disaster relief, which helps farmers recover after floods, fires, and other extreme events. Loans for critical projects like irrigation upgrades or storage facilities. Healthcare funding for rural communities, which many farm families depend on. The battle over the funding freeze is ongoing with some legal blocking and zigzagging. Some vulnerable programs like SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or food stamps, that serves more than 42 million people each month, is safe for now. This program is widely used by families living below the poverty line to buy food, including directly from farmers in CSAs and farmers markets. With retaliatory tariffs, a future water shortage, and now a funding freeze, farmers are being hit from all sides. Finally, let's turn to Point Reyes, California for a minute, where several historic farms and ranches have been forced to close. These closures come after a lengthy legal battle over land use, environmental concerns, and water rights in the area. Environmental groups argue that the land, which is part of the Point Reyes National Seashore, should be restored to its natural state. Meanwhile, farmers and ranchers fought to maintain leases that had been in their families for generations. In the end, the leases were terminated, and the farms, many of which produced grass-fed beef, organic dairy, and specialty crops, had no choice but to shut down. So what does this mean for other farmers? It highlights the growing tension between land conservation and agriculture, especially in regions where farmland intersects with protected areas. Without clear policies that balance environmental protection and food production, more farms could face similar battles. These closures are a sobering reminder that farmers not only have to contend with market forces, but also with changing land use priorities. I'm not going to lie, keeping up and following the bouncing ball is not easy. The current pattern is executive order or proclamation, then backlash and outcry, then a pivot or a partial retraction. But changes are happening by the minute. The coming weeks will be pivotal. Trade negotiations could escalate, further restricting farmers' export opportunities. In California, farmers are racing to find alternative water sources for the summer and to make adjusted crop plans. And as for the federal funding freeze, Congress is already pushing back, but we don't know yet how quickly the situation will be resolved. I'm going to do my best to keep you informed in this kind of monthly roundup. I want to hear your thoughts. Are you seeing changes in your own community? If you would like to comment on any of this or have specifics that you'd like to share about how these changes are impacting our food, please let me know. I'll include a link in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in to One Bite is Everything, the podcast that connects every bite you take to the bigger world, today to the world of politics. I am your host, Dana DePrima, here to remind you to stay curious, keep asking questions, and continue supporting the hardworking farmers who feed us all. I'll see you next week.